Welcome to Algorithmic Arguments. I'm your host, the Orchestrator. Tonight, we're diving into a debate that's got everyone from college basketball enthusiasts to conference strategists talking. Should the Big East tournament prioritize traditional rivalries or competitive balance? We've assembled an incredible panel to tackle this question. Joining me are Buck, Big Country, Owens, with his keen eye for sports strategy, Diana, Nana D. Kowalski, bringing her insight into what drives fan engagement, Brenda Ashworth-Collins, who'll analyze the tournament from a business and social intelligence perspective, and Coach Ray the Hammer Hamilton, with decades of experience in competitive team dynamics. Over the next hour, we'll dissect both sides of this argument, examining how traditional rivalries impact viewership versus seeding for a more balanced competition. Expect lively discussion, surprising perspectives, and perhaps even some consensus, or not. Let's get into it.
Well now, I tell you what, brother, as a fella who's spent his fair share of time on the gridiron and appreciates tradition, I'd say we gotta give some weight to those classic rivalries. There's something special about seeing old foes go at it again, like UConn and Syracuse or Villanova and Georgetown. That history and pageantry are part of what make these tournaments so enjoyable. On the other hand, I also think competitive balance is crucial. You don't want a tournament that's all about one team steamrolling the rest. I'd propose we find a middle ground, maybe seed the teams based on regular season performance, but also ensure that traditional rivalries are preserved in the bracket as much as possible. That way, you're getting the best of both worlds. Competitive balance and some good old-fashioned rivalry games. And that is just the truth of it.
In my opinion, the Big East tournament should prioritize traditional rivalries. As a proud Polish American from the old neighborhood, I understand the value of history and community that comes with these long-standing matchups. The rivalries between schools like Georgetown and Villanova or Connecticut and Syracuse aren't just about basketball, they're about pride, nostalgia, and shared experiences that transcend generations. By prioritizing these traditional rivalries, the Big East tournament can tap into that emotional resonance, drawing in fans who are invested in seeing their school's historic foes compete on a big stage. It's not just about competitive balance, it's about honoring the traditions and stories that make college basketball so rich and meaningful.
Listen up, kid. When it comes to tournament seeding, you gotta find that sweet spot between rivalry games and competitive balance. Now, I'm not saying traditional rivalries don't matter, they bring heart, history, and hype. But if you're prioritizing them over competitive balance, you're gonna end up with a bracket that's more about nostalgia than nuts and bolts matchups. The Big East needs to think about showcasing the best teams, not just rehashing old grudge matches. That being said, you can't ignore rivalries entirely, they bring eyeballs and energy. So here's what I'd do. Keep some of those marquee rivalry games early on, but make sure you're mixing in some high-seeded matchups to keep things fresh and competitive as the tournament heats up. That's how you build a bracket that'll keep fans invested till the final buzzer.
Coach Ray the Hammer Hamilton's mention of a specific bracket structure was cut off. Let's ensure we address the full argument.
Forgive me, but doesn't prioritizing competitive balance essentially ensure a more compelling tournament? I mean, who wouldn't want to see closely contested matches with unpredictable outcomes? That reminds me of a Nash equilibrium. In this case, the optimal strategy for maximizing viewer interest might not be about preserving traditional rivalries, but rather creating an environment where teams have an incentive to compete fiercely. Take Georgetown and Villanova, for instance. While their rivalry is historic, if seeding them based solely on competitive balance could lead to a more exciting tournament overall. How interesting that we often prioritize sentiment over strategy in these discussions.
What a clash of titans we've just witnessed, folks. Coach Hamilton's assertion that seeding based on overall conference performance would create a more compelling tournament narrative has stirred quite the debate. I think what's really at stake here is how we define tradition in college basketball. Is it about preserving storied rivalries or ensuring that every matchup feels consequential? As we head into our next round, I'm eager to see how our panelists will grapple with this question and whether they'll find common ground. If you're enjoying the give and take so far, be sure to tune in after the break. We've got more insightful discussion on deck.
I'd like to build on Coach Ray's Nash equilibrium concept. If we consider teams as players in a tournament, their strategies are influenced by seeding and matchups. By prioritizing competitive balance through strategic seeding, you create an environment where every game has significant stakes, encouraging fierce competition. Traditional rivalries can still be preserved without compromising competitiveness. For instance, guaranteeing certain rivalry games early on could actually enhance the overall appeal as fans invest in those specific matchups, knowing they're part of a larger, balanced bracket. How interesting that our discussion echoes principles from auction theory. Perhaps we should evaluate team pairings based on maximizing both competitive and emotional value simultaneously.
Big dog, let's get real here. We're not just talking about seeding, we're talking about what makes a tournament pop. You want that mix of familiarity and freshness. I still say you gotta start with some guaranteed rivalry games early on, but as we get to the semifinals and finals, it's time to let the best teams decide it. That way, you're honoring tradition while also giving fans a reason to believe every game matters. And let's not forget, kid, at the end of the day, people tune in for great basketball, not just nostalgia. So I'd propose this: keep those traditional matchups coming out of the gates, but make sure you're setting up competitive semi-final and final matchups that'll leave fans on the edge of their seats. That's how you build a tournament that's equal parts heart and high-stakes competition.
Well now, I tell you what, brother, as we wrap up this discussion, I think it's clear that we're dealing with a mighty fine dilemma here. On one hand, them traditional rivalries, like UConn-Syracuse and Villanova-Georgetown, are the real deal, stirring up all sorts of emotions and community engagement. But on the other hand, you gotta consider them casual fans, who might be more interested in seeing competitive balance after all. Nobody likes to watch a blowout game. I think what we've learned from this discussion is that it's not necessarily an either-or proposition. We can find a sweet spot that gives traditional rivalries their due, while still ensuring some competitiveness across the board. Now, I'm no expert on game theory, but it seems like that's where concepts like the Nash equilibrium come in helping us strike that balance. And that is just the truth of it.
As we near the end of this discussion, I'd like to emphasize that finding a sweet spot between tradition and competitiveness isn't merely an exercise in compromise, it's an imperative for fostering enduring fan loyalty. In my experience following classic Hollywood studio system, timeless rivalries such as UConn-Syracuse aren't just about wins or losses, they embody narratives of community identity. However, embracing competitive balance injects unpredictability, keeping casual fans invested across a broader spectrum of matchups. By synthesizing these elements, the Big East can create an environment where both die-hard enthusiasts and new viewers find value. The Nash equilibrium concept aptly demonstrates that optimal outcomes arise when rivalries and competitiveness coexist in harmony. Ultimately, prioritizing one over the other risks alienating segments of their fan base. A thoughtful blend will yield long-term success and deeper connections with fans across demographics.
As we conclude this discussion, I want to synthesize the key points and reiterate my stance on finding a sweet spot that balances tradition with competitiveness. Forgive me, But it seems to me that prioritizing solely one over the other would be akin to optimizing for a single variable in a multivariate system. We'd risk overlooking crucial interdependencies. The Nash equilibrium concept supports this nuanced approach, suggesting that an optimal strategy must account for both rivalries and competitive balance. My analysis of historical data indicates that incorporating elements of both yields higher overall engagement across fan demographics. I'd like to propose that we revisit the scheduling algorithm with a focus on maximizing expected value, mathematically, not just intuitively. How interesting that this convergence of perspectives might actually yield actionable insights. Let's ensure our final recommendations reflect that synthesis bar chart.
All right, kid, let's get down to business. I've been listening to this discussion, and I gotta say, it's a tough call. But here's what I know, you can't just ignore history. Traditional rivalries like UConn-Syracuse and Villanova-Georgetown are the lifeblood of this tournament. They bring in die-hard fans who live and breathe this stuff. Now, I'm not saying competitive balance isn't important. You want close games that keep people on the edge of their seats. But if you prioritize one over the other, you're gonna leave out a whole segment of your fan base. The sweet spot, big dog, is finding a way to marry those two things. Maybe it's seeding teams in a way that sets up those marquee matchups early, while still keeping the competition fierce. Whatever it is, you gotta make sure you're not sacrificing one for the other. That's just bad coaching.
As we wrap up this episode of Algorithmic Arguments, let's distill the essence of our conversation on whether the Big East tournament should prioritize traditional rivalries or competitive balance. We saw compelling arguments from all sides, but what stood out was Brenda Ashworth-Collins' emphasis on preserving history and fan engagement through traditional rivalries. Her points about the cultural significance of these matchups resonated deeply. In contrast, others made a strong case for ensuring competitive balance to maintain the tournament's integrity and excitement. Brenda Ashworth-Collins takes the top spot with 15 points, thanks to her nuanced understanding of both sides and her ability to articulate why traditional rivalries matter beyond just nostalgia. I want to thank Buck, Big Country, Owens, Diana, Nana D. Kowalski, and Coach Ray the Hammer Hamilton for their thoughtful contributions. To our audience, thank you for joining us. If you're eager for more thought-provoking discussions like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. Your engagement fuels our next conversations. Until next time, keep questioning, keep debating, and we'll see you in the algorithm.